We're on our way from Jericho up the mountainsides. Stop to rest, and this takes place. But the other 10 disciples were there. They were outraged. They were jealous. They were angry. Just a little background on the book, the 20th chapter of the book of Matthew. A few weeks ago we saw Jesus in the Galilee and then traveling down the east side of the Jordan River. Coming to the Jordan River near Jericho, they crossed. We even saw a picture of how muddy the Jordan River is in that area. Not the place that you would like to be baptized, but the place where Yeshua was baptized. Then they made their way to Jericho, which is a couple of miles from the Jordan River. The Bible doesn't say how long they stayed there, but they're with a large group of people and they're traveling to Jerusalem. I think as they traveled, their caravan or their group of people got larger and larger. And when they left Jericho, it even got larger. And they're heading up the mountainside. Picture, they are now leaving Jericho, and it's about 1,000 feet below sea level. They're underwater. If the ocean was there, they would be deep underwater. But there was no ocean, so they're surrounded by air. And they're going to travel from that low place to 3,000 feet above sea level. So that's a height, a mountain to climb of 4,000 feet. And the paths are very winding and twisting and very steep. And as they're going, Jesus talks, they stop, and while they're resting, Jesus talks to them. Matthew chapter 20, verse 18. Yeshua said, we're now going to Jerusalem, where the Son of Man will be handed over to the head priests and to the scribes or the Torah teachers, and they will sentence him to death. And then they will turn him over to the Goyim, or the Gentiles. Those people there assembled there will jeer at him. They will beat him, they will execute him on a cross as a criminal. But on the third day, he will be raised. They're on a journey to Jerusalem for the feast of Passover. And our Savior's mind is thinking forward to about a week later, when he will be judged by his countrymen, by the people he went to synagogue with, by the Torah teachers and the Levites and the high priest. They would condemn him to death, and then they would turn him over to someone else to do the job of killing him. The scripture tells us that this was the third time Jesus spoke to his disciples about his coming torture and death. And then we have a Jewish mother that comes into the conversation. And Jewish mothers are sort of special. They want the very best for their children. They do not want their children to be ditch diggers and bricklayers and security guards. They have higher aspirations for their little babies, even though their babies are 20 years old or 18 years old. Their children are going to become doctors and lawyers and professors and owners of manufacturing companies and movie stars and movie directors, but nothing on the lower pay scale. And so we have an ambitious Jewish mother. And she brings her 2 sons with her to sit down at the feet of Jesus. Then Zebedei's sons came to Yeshua with their mother. Maybe the mother was the instrument in this little scenario, but I suspect that the 2 sons put their mother up to it. The sons came to Yeshua with their mother. Sort of indicates they were playing with their mother. And she bowed down at the feet of Jesus and she begged Jesus for a favor. You ever do that? You owe me a favor? I beg you to promise me that you'll do something? Verse 21 says, and he said to her, what do you want? And she replied, promise me that when you become king, these 2 sons of mine may sit one on your right hand and one on your left hand. Good positions. The King of Kings, with John on his right hand, and not James, Jacob on his left hand. But Yeshua answered, you people, not talking just to the mother, the 3 of you, you don't understand what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I am about to drink? They said to him, yes, we can. We can. We'll do this. Whatever you want us to drink, we'll do it. Now, remember back, Jesus was thinking and had just announced to them again that when he got to Jerusalem, the scribes and the priests and the Pharisees and the people were going to have him arrested. First, they were going to question him and try to find some fault in him. But they were going to turn them, when they decided that he was guilty of being saying that he was equal to God, they would have him condemned to death for blasphemy. And yes, he was equal to God. And he gave up everything in heaven to come to this sin-sick world. The cup. What was this cup? I don't think Yaakov and John understood what the cup was. He was going to be beaten more than any man was ever beaten before. He was going to be whipped until he almost died. And they says, yeah, we're willing. We can. We can endure this. He said to them, yes, you will drink of my cup. And all of the apostles died violent deaths except for John. John, he didn't die a violent death. He died of old age. But before John died, they took and boiled him in oil. Imagine yourself being boiled in oil and the burns and the pain and the scarring that took place. And how people would look at you afterwards. We'll drink my cup. But to sit at my Father's right hand and at my right hand and left hand is only up to my Father to decide. I can't grant that to you. What was the reaction? We're on our way from Jericho up the mountainsides. Stop to rest, and this takes place. But the other 10 disciples were there. They were outraged. They were jealous. They were angry. Why? Because 2 of their fellow companions who had been with them for at least 3 years, traveling together, being taught by Yeshua, preaching the gospel, 2 of them had asked for special favor in the kingdom. They didn't understand what the kingdom was. They were looking for the king, for Yeshua to set up his kingdom on earth. They were looking to be his right-hand man and his left-hand man, sitting on thrones and ruling the kingdom. But that wasn't the path that they were walking into. And when the other 10 heard about this, they were outraged at the 2 brothers. This was a little congregation of 12 men plus Yeshua. And because of the actions of 2 men, the other 10 responded in anger, outraged that Jacob and John would do such a dastardly thing. How could they dare put themselves or request that they would be higher in authority than they were? Maybe they were thinking of talking to Jesus himself and saying, "Can I sit at your right hand?" Ambition and jealousy brings about anger and division. But Yeshua called them and said, "You know that among the Gentiles, the Goyim, those who are supposed to rule them become tyrants, and their superiors become dictators." The people who are not believers, Gentiles is someone that is not a believer in the thinking of a Jewish person. Call them Gentiles or Goy. Or Goy for one, Goyim for several. Just a Hebrew lesson at this point. When you're trying to pronounce a word that is from the Hebrew, you emphasize the last syllable. Goyim. Okay? Or Goy. And we were, in Israel, we were called, because we believed in Yeshua, even though we were Jewish, Goy! And it's not a compliment.
Oh.
Infidel, unbeliever, traitor. So goyim, it's not the best word today. But the nations, the unbelievers, when they want to become rulers, they want to be tyrants, superiors, and dictators. And that's the tendency of human nature. When you become the boss, you let everybody know who the boss is. Right? But that's not what Jesus intended. Becoming servants and slaves. Among you it must not be like this. On the contrary, don't ask to be the sitting on my right hand or on my left hand. Because this is the opposite of what I am demonstrating to you. I have come into the world to be an example to you. Did he show off his leadership? Did he command and dictate to the apostles? On the contrary, whoever among you wants to be a leader, Yeshua is asking the questions. If you want to answer that question, I want to be a leader, raise your hand. Okay? You want to be a leader, and then Yeshua tells you how. There's nothing wrong with being a leader. It's how you get there and how you handle the job. On the contrary, whoever among you wants to be the leader, that person must become your servant. And whoever wants to become first must become a slave. Ouch. How many of you want to become leaders in the kingdom? I do. But not for glory. We become leaders by becoming the servants. By following the example of Yeshua. By washing each other's feet. By loving one another. By having a heart that goes out to other people. By doing the worst job there is to do. If you want to be great in God's kingdom, you must become the servant of all. You must become slaves. And then he nailed it down. He says, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Too many times in our life, we want to be served. We want to be recognized. We want to be bowed down to. We want to be appreciated. And Yeshua said, the Son of Man, who is the Son of God, did not come for people to serve him, but he came to serve, to be a servant. And not only to be a servant, but to give his life as the ransom money, the ransom for many. And that's what he did. Yeshua sees it different than what we see it. He wants each one of us to be the servant of servants in our community. And on the top of saying, I want you to be the servant, he encounters two blind men sitting by the side of the road. They're outside of Jericho now. Maybe they're part of a village, a way station on the way up from Jericho to Jerusalem. But there's two blind people sitting by the side of the road. They heard that he was passing by and shouted, "Son of David, have mercy on us." You can read this story in the book of Mark and the book of Luke, and it adds a little more to it. One place it says, "Yeshua Adonai ben David, Tan lanu chesed." Yeshua the Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. The religious congregation, they're on their way to Jerusalem, to the temple, for the feast of Passover. And they're traveling together, and the crowd's getting bigger as they're walking to Jerusalem. And this crowd scolded the two blind men and told them, "Be quiet." I like this. But they shouted all the louder when they were told to be quiet. It was Yeshua that was coming. They had heard that he healed the sick. He opened the eyes of the blind. He did great miracles. They had heard about him. He said, "Adonai, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." They should have been quiet, shouldn't they? When we're going through the city and we see a beggar on the street, and there are a few in Lethbridge, we're not going to look at them because they're usually in dirty clothes. What can a blind person do? Can they harvest the fields? Can they work in a carpenter shop? Can they hold down a job? Unlikely. Can they see whether their clothes are neatly pressed and their hair is combed right? No, they look pretty bad. And they're probably not very clean. And they probably don't smell like perfume. So when we're passing someone on the street and they're asking for mercy, God is saying to us, Yeshua, God is saying to us to serve them, to become a slave to the lowest in society. And Yeshua stopped and called them and said, "What is it you want me to do for you?" Someone's asking you for change so they can go buy another drink. Do you just ignore them? Do you give them change? Can you give me a quarters? I haven't eaten for 3 days. Did you give him a quarter, or did you take him to the restaurant to eat, or to your home to eat? Yeshua stopped and called him. What is it that you want me to do for you? What a door that can open. Peter and John at the gate, the beautiful gates of the temple, said, the beggars asking for silver and gold have we none, but what we have, we will give it to you. And they proclaimed, "Rise up and walk." And the man rose up and he started jumping and skipping and rejoicing in the Lord. So when someone asks for something, we have something we can give. The power of God, the love of God, the miracles of God. They said to him, all we want is our eyes opened. You read it in another place. Bartimaeus is what we usually read. Bar-Timei, it would have been his Hebrew name, son of Timei. He was called son of Timei. Bartimaeus was one of those two. Lord, I just want my eyes. I just want to see. And Yeshua again living what he was teaching, filled with tenderness and compassion. Yeshua reached out and touched his eyes, and instantly touched their eyes, and instantly they received their sight, and they followed him. On the streets, in the countryside, in the desert, it happened. But it wasn't inside the congregation. Sometimes, a few of the times when a miracle happened, it happened inside of the congregation. I think we need to see miracles happening on the street. And then we'll see more miracles happening inside of the congregation. God is positioning our congregation on the street. I have been amazed this week that God would give us a building at a bus stop. That wasn't part of choosing the building. My first thought when I saw the bus stop was, we won't be able to park in front of the building. Wrong, Sydney. But every day, about every 20 minutes, there's people in front of the building waiting for the bus. And do you know what they're doing? They're turning around. They're waiting for the bus. It's coming this way. They're turning around. They're reading. For God so loved the world. They're looking for a city whose builder is God. They're reading it. What a place God has positioned us to be in. And we're going to be sitting on that bench. Waiting for someone to come to the bus.
When I left, Vince
Yes.
was sitting there talking to a man.
Vince was demonstrating exactly that yesterday. A man sitting outside on the bench. He went and sat down beside him. God is preparing our congregation to do great things. To be compassionate and tender-hearted. When someone is facing death in their life, or death in their family, or a sickness unto death, how do we feel when someone's in that position? Oh, don't bother me. You'd never say that, would you?
No.
But in your heart, I don't want to hear it. No, we're not that callous. Or are we? God sees what's in our mind and in our heart. You don't have to tell the preacher about it. But God knows it. How are we feeling when someone is ambitious and wanting to serve and to lead? Are we jealous? Are we angry? over the years, there's been a lot of different phrases for someone who's cozying up to the boss. That's not the words that have been used. They're not so kind as that. But we use those things. He's cozying up to the boss. He's the teacher's pet. So that they can get a better position. At least that's what's in our heart. We think that's why they're doing it. So we're no different than the 10 apostles, who were angry and outraged at what was going on. How did John and Jacob feel when the 10 were angry? You can see anger in people's eyes, right?
Yeah.
You can see jealousy in their face. Even if they didn't speak it, and I think they probably spoke it, how did the two feel when they encountered that anger? Did they feel, forgive me, I didn't know what I was doing? But my mother made me do it. If you guys hadn't have been so slow on the uptake, you would have been there too. We make excuses for why we're outraged or jealous or angry. How do we feel when someone is becoming a slave and a servant? Do we feel good about somebody else being the servant? Or does it encourage us to want to become the servant? How do I feel when I'm approached by someone in dirty, stinking clothes and he smells like the brewery? And my words are already indicating my reaction. He smells like the brewery. His clothes are dirty. Okay. Do we embrace them? When someone has a disease that's contagious, do you give them a hug? Maybe that's what they need. And possibly God may protect you from the disease. And possibly He may not. And you may contract the illness. But is it worth it to demonstrate being a servant to that person? Yes. I remember back in the early 80s, mid-80s, when AIDS, remember AIDS, the disease? And we thought there was reports that if they breathed on you, you would get it. Or if they spit on you, you would get it. And everybody was afraid. And no one wanted to get within very close to someone with AIDS. And I remember battling that, going through that battle myself. Linda and I went in Oregon to speak in a home for people with AIDS, men. And most of them were dying. And a man came forward at the end of the service, gave his heart to the Lord. And normally after I pray with someone like that, I'll give him a hug. But that day I wasn't so normal. And I really didn't want to hug him. But the Lord pushed me. And after hesitating and the Lord speaking into my heart and my mind, I just threw my arms around him and cried with him and prayed for his healing. Those are the times when we take a giant step. The baby step was when I was wondering. It was the giant step when you overcome your fears and say, God, I'm in your hands, and you embrace them. Beggars, people sick, people with leprosy, outcasts. And in Canada, we need to include in all of those things. We're Canadians. We're not like the Americans who are prejudiced. I heard that when I was growing up. Canadians are not prejudiced. We do not hate and segregate against the blacks.
What about the natives?
That's the point. We have more prejudice against the Native Americans than the U.S. Americans had against the blacks. And it's still there. In the U.S., they had a civil rights movement and the whole scenario changed. But have we had a civil rights movement in Canada where us good white people came along, the First Nations, and embraced them and walked with them and changed our hearts with them? And Yeshua says to us, I have come as an example to demonstrate in front of you what you should be doing. He is our example, and he says to us, will you follow my example? Will you walk in my footsteps? Will you go wherever I go? We are his servants. We are the bond slaves of the Messiah.
Hoshiana, Yeshua, HaMashiach, Ben David. Hoshiana, Yeshua, HaMashiach, Ben David.